welcome to today's webinar. Before we begin, we would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to elders past and present, and also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people that may be listening today. My name is Jessica Sullivan and I work in the Community Legal Education branch at Legal Aid. And I'm joined today by Mary Lovelock and Tanya Chapman from the Elder Abuse Service on the Central Coast, and also by Melody Pascoe, who is a financial counsellor for Legal Aid. So, hi guys.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Okay, great. So we're just going to start off with a quick poll to get an idea of our audience. So I'll launch that now for you. So just a quick question, how confident do you feel about identifying and referring potential financial elder abuse cases? So just select one of those options there, confident, average, a little bit, or zero confidence. I'll give you a couple of moments to do that one, and then I'll share those results. Okay, so we've got some people are very confident, which is great. That's what we want everyone to be at the end. We've got most people sitting in average. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will be hopefully a little more confident, which is what we want. And one final question, have you ever suspected elder abuse was occurring to a client or a family member? So yes, but it wasn't sure what to do, yes, and reported it, or no. Okay, and so we've got kind of an even split here. Yes, but yeah, that's interesting. Thank you, guys. Okay, so before we jump into the proper content of this webinar, I'm just going to pass over to Mary to give you a little brief overview of what the Elder Abuse Service actually does. So Mary, do you want to lead us through that?
Thanks, Jess. Hi, my name's Mary Lovelock and I'm the Senior Solicitor of the Elder Abuse Service, which runs from the Gosford Office of Legal Aid, New South Wales. So this is a service, it's relatively new. We've only been up and running for 6 months. It came about as a result of the Australian Law Reform Commission review in 2017 that identified that there was huge amounts of underreported elder abuse and made a recommendation that there be a national response to elder abuse. So a number of government agencies received funding to set up various responses to elder abuse, like police, hospital, legal assistance services. And in New South Wales, Legal Aid is the only elder abuse service that's running. So it's a 3-year pilot that's funded by the Commonwealth Government. There's probably 2 things that are a little bit different about our services. So one is that we've got a social worker in our team. That's a little bit different for legal services to have social workers in teams, although health services have been doing it for a long time. And there's a lot of evidence to say that multidisciplinary practices are the way to really address complex problems. And the second bit is that we're a tertiary service, which means that in the main, instead of clients sort of knocking on the door of Legal Aid and coming to see us, we get our clients through our key stakeholders. So that might be health, it might be police, it's definitely financial counsellors and other services that provide face-to-face services to older people. So there's 3 criteria for being eligible for the service. So one is that you've got to live on the Central Coast, so we're geographically bound. Our clients have to be older than 65 or older than 50 for our Aboriginal clients, and they have to be at risk of or experiencing elder abuse. So why is our service important? Well, there's not a huge amount of research on the prevalence of elder abuse. But somewhere between 2 and 12% of people experience elder abuse. We've got an ageing population, and elder abuse we know can have devastating impacts, not just on the individual, financially, emotionally, socially, but also on their families and their communities. And we know that currently, about 15% of the population is over 65, but in the next 20 years, that's going to rise to over 20% of the population. So it's an issue we need to get our heads around. Okay, thanks, Jess.
So I've just had a couple of comments as you've been speaking. So is there a similar service in Queensland at all? Do you know?
Oh, well, Queensland has got the most established service for working with older people in the form of Caxton Legal Service, which runs from Brisbane. And they've got both amazing resources online and also a really wide reach of their services across Queensland.
Yeah, great. And I was also had a really relevant comment here from someone that there are a number of community legal centres that do elder abuse work as well. Not at all to take away from the great work that they do either. So that includes Seniors' Rights, the Mid North Coast CLC, Financial Rights, and I'm sure there are a lot of others. So thank you for that comment. Very good point.
Yeah, thanks for acknowledging that.
Yeah. So just quickly, what we're going to cover today is just a very quick overview of elder abuse, and then we'll move on to financial hardship and financial abuse in particular. We've got a few case studies, and then we'll also talk about how to help your older clients who might be experiencing financial abuse, where to go for help, list you off some resources that you can go to, and then we'll have plenty of time for question and answers at the end. So let's get started with what is elder abuse. Tanya, would you like to take us through this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use the definition that was provided by the World Health Organization, and the definition is a single or repeated act or lack of action occurring within a relationship of trust that causes harm or distress to the older person. So it's basically any action that causes an older person to experience abuse, but the key factor in the definition itself is that it has to be perpetrated by someone the older person trusted and was close to. So we're talking family relationships, friends, carers. It sometimes gets confusing when you hear something called elder abuse, but it might actually be age discrimination, or they might refer to some actions as elder abuse, but it actually happens by an employer or by a bank or someone the older person doesn't trust. So this definition really narrows down the field and says it's that relation of trust that causes a level of vulnerability in the older person because they're not protecting themselves as much as a normal person would. They're trusting this person and that trust is abused. So when we're talking about that, any action or lack of action, what we're talking about is it also includes neglect. So if the person just does nothing and lets the older person suffer as a consequence, that is also abuse. The five main types are psychological, which includes verbal abuse and intimidation, sexual abuse, neglect, physical abuse, and financial abuse, which is what we're going to be focusing on today.
Yep, thank you. So we'll just move to Melody now to get more of a financial counsellor perspective on this, because that's why we're having this webinar today, really. So Melody, did you want to share some perspectives that you have picked up from your work?
Yeah, sure. So financial abuse, from what I'm seeing as a financial counsellor, is when someone takes someone's access away to their money. Manipulation is often involved, so manipulating the person's financial decisions and using their money without their consent. And once someone is aware of this financial abuse, there are certain ways that they can get help and regain their independence, and that's what this webinar is about. And obviously financial counsellors can assist, and also the elder abuse unit and the community lawyers that we talked about as well that people mentioned. Financial abuse is a type of family violence, as so there's a few different sorts of violence that Tanya has just mentioned, and it often happens alongside other types of violence such as physical or emotional abuse. It can leave people feeling vulnerable, isolated, depressed, and anxious, and it can also take away their independence. It can happen to anyone, and the abuser can be a partner or a family member or a carer or a friend, And also what I'm seeing in my area in Western Sydney is groups of people. So it's often an acquaintance or a friend of a friend, and they'll say that they will assist a person, often an elderly person, and that group of people will actually financially abuse them. Elder abuse, it's also a serious problem, obviously, elder financial abuse. And older people can be more vulnerable to financial abuse because of, physical and mental health issues, struggling with like dementia and, so you've got those issues that older people in particular, they struggle with and they're taken advantage of. This is because they often depend on others for help with financial tasks and decisions.
And we would have seen that a lot more recently with COVID as well. So they're being more isolated, more reliant on other people. So it has been a little bit of a, what's the word, petri dish that of issues arising.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yep. And yeah, we think September, October, when a lot of the restrictions have come down, that we'll be seeing a lot more clientele coming out needing help as well.
Yep. And there's also just a note there on your screen at the moment that financial counselling is a free service available to everyone. And there's a phone number there for the credit and debt hotline if you want to find who your local financial counsellor was or get in touch with them for a client. Thank you, Melody. Yep. So, Tanya, do you want to just, we've touched on quite a lot of it already, but just breaking down financial abuse a bit more, what are the types and what are the signs of it?
Yeah, so we have touched on it a bit, but it does include basically theft and fraud. So stealing an older person's property, or fraud when you deceive them and you might say, I'm going to pay it back, or you're just borrowing it, or you use deception to get it. There's also the abuse of a power of attorney, because attorneys have a lot of authority to deal with the older person's property. So they might use that for their own interest rather than for the older person's. Changing a will, forcing an older person to change the will is also considered financial abuse, because you normally do that to get a financial benefit. You get them to change the will to benefit you, you get something out of it at the end. Pressuring an older person, so even guilting them into giving money, even though there's this illusion that it's a voluntary action, there's that pressure involved that makes it involuntary. There's these two terms that are going around a lot lately: inheritance conservation and inheritance impatience. Inheritance conservation is basically where the older person is told not to deal with their property or assets because they've got to preserve it so that they can leave it to the kids. So it might be, no, you can't go on that holiday because then you'll spend all your money and you won't leave anything to me. And inheritance impatience is where the person doesn't want to wait until their parent dies. They want the property now. So they might force them to transfer the house, or they might convince them to do it, but they work the relationship in a way that they get their inheritance before the older person has died. There is this sense of entitlement when it comes to estates, where people seem to view their parents' property as their rightful inheritance, which is completely false. It's the older person's property. They can do with it whatever they want. They have no obligation to leave anything to their children, but this sense of entitlement seems built into our community, into society, and it's something we need to challenge. And the final one is misuse of home care packages, which is a bit complex to go into today. I will touch up on some of the signs. So if the older person has bills and debts that they shouldn't, so you know they should have funds they could access, but suddenly they've got this debt and they've got these unpaid bills, why aren't they getting paid? Big warning sign. If there's large withdrawals of cash, and this is one we can, banks are getting on board to help identify this. So if you've had an older person who only took out $60 a week, and suddenly at 10 p.m. at night, every Friday night, there's $2,000 getting taken out, that's a warning sign. Property missing, just being stolen, sometimes even cars. So a child or a nephew might say, Nan doesn't need the car anymore, and suddenly it's not there. lack of knowledge about finances is a warning sign, but you've got to approach it carefully, because sometimes an older person might hand over their finances to the attorney, say, it's too difficult, you deal with that for me. And they might not know about it, and there might not be abuse, but it is something to look into. If there's a lack of records, if the older person isn't allowed to see records, we have heard cases where the bank statements are taken out of the mailbox before the older person can see them. And then if the older person is depressed, is withdrawn, some of those things Melody touched on, signs of depression, isolation, they're warning signs as well.
Yeah. Did you also want to touch on, Tanya, just what the profile, I guess, is of a financial abuser? I mean, it's a pretty broad question, but...
It's, predominantly, it is children and spouses. With spouses, it's a bit harder to identify because you have that joint property, but the statistics do indicate that these types of abuse are most predominantly done by children, and then spouses, and then other family members, friends, carers. And then, as Melody touched on as well, there's now these groups that have kind of isolated and identified older persons as being a source of finance.
Yeah.
I was just going to add to that the statistics show that over 50% of reported cases of elder abuse note the adult child as the abuser, and it's kind of roughly 50-50, I think slightly more male adult children than female adult children, but it's a pretty heartbreaking statistic, and it also underpins how difficult it is for older people to report elder abuse, because it really goes against that, parental, instinct to protect your child.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jess.
I've just had a note from someone who was asking about whether financial counselling services are available in language and with interpreters. And so I've just commented, and correct me if I'm wrong, Melody, but interpreters are available, and there are financial counsellors who are also bilingual. So there's a way to link up with the different language needs, I guess, of the client. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So all financial counsellors are trained on how to use interpreters, and I know that Legal Aid use TIS, quite a large service across Australia, TIS. But yeah, a client can call up any service and ask for an interpreter, and it should be provided these days. So yeah, about 70% of my clients in Western Sydney are non-English speaking, so using interpreters really regularly.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I've also had a few comments here that I'll just read out. So the Australian Banking Association and Bauer Media did a campaign last year, Elder Financial Abuse. COVID-19 has unfortunately put a lot of things in the background. Christian Porter was successful in getting a national registry of powers of attorney over the line. Have the Legal Aid heard any updates on this? I think ABA are looking at re-promoting the campaign. Mary?
ABA are looking at re-promoting the campaign. It is a little bit on the back burner, but that's what we're heading towards. We're heading towards a national register. There's good bits and bad bits about that. One really good thing that's come out of the ABA is that there's new banking regulations that specifically refer to how banking staff are to deal with vulnerable clients. And we've used that, and I know financial counsellors have used that a number of times to get debts waived when all of a sudden the older person's banking profile completely changes because, the adult son has accessed the PIN number for the father or the mother and is just, taking money out of the account. And that's something now that banks are aware of, and there's an obligation to act on it.
No, that's good. I've had a few questions here about guardianship, but we're going to talk about that after our first case study. So I'll just leave that just for now, and we'll move on to our first case study. So this is a case study that came from Melody's experience. So this is Matthias. He's 73 years old. He migrated from South America with his 2 adult children. He lives with his daughter Maria in a rental property and has no assets. Matthias is on the age pension, has limited English and Parkinson's disease. His son took out a car loan of $15,000 in his father's name without telling him. The son has since sold the car and is now in jail. The car loan debt collectors are now asking for the money, and he cannot afford to pay back the $15,000. And just a note that Maria also has 2 large debts that she was forced to take out by her brother. So the question here is, what can be done to help Matthias? So you can select as many as you think apply. So you could refer to a financial counsellor, do a power of attorney, report to police, refer him to the elder abuse service, refer Maria to a financial counsellor. Just have a moment to tick as many as you think would be relevant here. And I'll give you a second and then I'll share those results. So we've got a really good overview.
Yeah.
I think most people are going straight to financial counsellor to get a debt waiver, which is great. Do you guys want to discuss what you would do here?
Do you want to go? You go first, Melody.
Yeah, so definitely referring to a financial counsellor, who can do a budget with the client and then contact the creditor or debt collector involved and speak on behalf of the client. And because he's on an age pension and doesn't have any assets, yeah, he's eligible for a debt waiver. Yeah.
I think if he was referred to the elder abuse service, yes, there are legal issues in that there are, definite legal issues in that case study, but there's also kind of social issues, as I say, that underpin the challenging circumstances around reporting elder abuse. So one of the things about our services, we've got a social worker. So we would be getting our social worker to engage with Matthias, perhaps provide him some support in relation to connecting him with services, perhaps connecting him with some South American community supports, things that can help strengthen his financial security as well too. And the social worker would probably work with him around setting boundaries around working with his children. Obviously, there's particular challenges in coal communities in the way older people rely on their children to help navigate the world for them in circumstances where they have limited language skills, and helping Matthias to navigate that. While it's not a legal problem, if we don't kind of address those issues, then it leaves him vulnerable to further legal problems. So I suppose that's the one thing about taking that, having a multidisciplinary team, in that we can look at Matthias's problem as a whole.
It's also interesting to note that so many people promoted for contacting the police. And so when we discussed this case with Melody, I remember she mentioned that the client really didn't want to engage with police because he still was protective of his son and didn't want his son to get into any trouble. So you need to acknowledge the client's wishes, especially around family relationships, and it can take away some of our options. So normally that option would be on the board, but in this case, that wasn't what the client wanted.
Yeah, so what happened in the end with this case, Melody?
So yeah, so it was a challenge for this case to get a debt waiver, even though he was on an age pension and didn't have any assets, which is the main criteria for debt waivers, because they asked about the car. So it was a car loan, and they said where was the car, and wanted to sell it and get the value, and then leave the leftover debt amount for Matthias to pay, yeah, so I explained that the son had actually sold the car and changed the number plates, and good luck to them trying to find its whereabouts. So, but they did fight me for a bit because the loan was only a couple of years old as well. So it was, it was a bit more than the 15,000 it started at. But Matthias had been paying it and going without every fortnight. So really good outcome that we got the debt waiver. And also, the son was forcing him to give $50 a fortnight of his age pension because the son was in jail. So to take to the son in jail once a fortnight, and the daughter was giving money as well. And so we just had conversations around that, and that money transfer to the son in jail stopped, and also were able to get him affordable car insurance because he and his daughter shared a car together, and it was only worth a couple of $1,000. And there's an affordable car insurance called Essentials AAI, which is on your handout there from the financial counselling handout. So really good budgeting stuff as well, being able to get him deductions on his utility bills and things like that. And also the daughter, she mentioned that she had 2 debts, a credit card and a loan, that were first forced on her by her brother, and she was able to come in. We were able to get a settlement with one of the credit cards, which was, she used her tax return, and we offered 40% of the debt and got that over with for her, and then set her up on an affordable short-term payment arrangement for the personal loan, because she was in full-time work but working on a low wage. So a really good outcome all round for the whole family. Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Just had a few questions come in, but I also just wanted to say that it's a really good point that I picked up talking to you guys yesterday about if you have any client who is paying any amount of money or is being left with any kind of loan or debt, to, before they pay anything, go and get advice from legal aid or a community legal centre or a financial counsellor, because it's a lot harder to get money back if you've already paid for it as opposed to before you start paying it. That's the best time to go and get legal help.
Yes, definitely.
But
Thanks,
I have
Jess, for pointing that out.
a question. Is there a specific Indigenous financial abuse program? And where can they find money about the misuse of home care packages? So quite a, curveball question.
So I am actually Aboriginal, and I'm on the New South Wales Aboriginal Financial Counselling team. So we meet once a month, and all across New South Wales, there's about 20 of us. So there are actually some Aboriginal financial counsellors with that knowledge of Indigenous issues. So you've got that, which you could speak to FCAN, the Financial Council of New South Wales, to find out about if there is an Indigenous financial counsellor in your area. Also on the Money Smart website, which we've put down in the handouts, there's some great resources about, it's called like My Mob. So how to speak to Aboriginals about their finances in relation to particularly funeral insurance can be a big issue, and payday loans. And so if you look up Indigenous resources on the Money Smart website, that's a great resource. Yeah, so they're the resources I know of in relation to working with Indigenous people and issues in particular to their cultural background.
Thanks, Melody. A few people just commenting now and about different links and where to get all of these. And just a reminder that there are 3 handouts attached to the presentation today, and you can go and click into those and download those. They'll also be in the email that gets sent out after this webinar, and if you're watching this as a recorded webinar on YouTube, it will be in the episode notes below you. So we might just move on now to planning ahead and talk a little bit more about the guardianship that came up and powers of attorney. Was this Tanya or Mary? Who was going to speak to this? Mary, I think.
Tanya?
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay,
Hold on, I'm planning ahead. Oh no, that was me. I was going to speak to this one. Sorry about that. I was one slide with myself. You can see what a coordinated team we are. So this is about safety nets. So, you look at Matthias's circumstances, and when we come to our second case study, and when we were planning this webinar, we were thinking, like, what are the safety nets to sort of protect older people from having this happen to them? So we looked at planning ahead documents. So you've got powers of attorney, you've got guardianship, advanced care directives, and you've got your will, and they're all documents that in themselves don't solve problems, because a lot of our problems arise from people misusing money under power of attorneys. But what they do is they focus the older person's attention on what they would like to happen. So they focus the older person's attention on who is a trustworthy person to be appointed under a power of attorney, who's a person that I want to execute my will. You know, when it comes to making a will document, who are the people that I want to that rely upon me, that have relied upon me financially, that I want to make provisions for in my will? Who are people in my family that I don't want to make provisions for in my will, that perhaps I've already loaned $200,000 to, you know, help them buy a house? So, I mean, I think in a way that's a safety net, because it usually, well, it invariably brings that older person into contact with a professional, whether it be a financial counsellor, whether it be a lawyer, who can help that older person articulate what they want. And I mean, I really feel that's a safety net. So in terms of powers of attorney, you know, you can have an enduring power of attorney or an enduring guardianship. And the enduring bit really means that it can continue to remain in force after the older person loses capacity, which is, of course, the most important time, because then the older person hasn't got the capacity to scrutinise the transactions that may occur under it, or the decisions that are made. They are really important documents for an older person to get in order, and we encourage every older person to be able to have that suite of documents for their planning ahead.
Yep. And just a note that essentially for any community or health worker, it's okay to, you know, get in contact with someone on behalf of your client and say, I don't think something's right here, because as it says there, you have a duty of care, not case, a duty of care to your alleged victim. Tanya, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah.
I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Can't hear you.
If we go into the next slide, I'll just go into what happens if you don't have a power of attorney and enduring guardian, because it can be this side that makes people think, oh, I really need to get them. So when you've done the power of attorney and enduring guardian, you've made the decision that if I ever lose capacity, my attorney is the person I've chosen to deal with my finances, my guardian is the person I've chosen to make medical decisions. If you don't have those documents and you lose capacity, what happens then? Who makes those decisions for you? And this is the backup system. It's basically any person who knows about you and what's going on. It could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be the medical people trying to treat you, it could be the neighbour. Anyone can make an application to the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal. Shorten it down, it's NCAT. So anyone can make an application to NCAT, and the application basically says, here's this person, they don't have capacity to manage their finances, or they don't have capacity to make medical decisions anymore, and someone needs to be appointed to make those decisions with them. So that's the nature of the application. What the tribunal does is it takes that application, it gets as much evidence as it can, so medical records are pretty much number one. It also gets an idea of who would want to be appointed. So maybe the applicant itself is a child saying, I'll be mum's financial manager. Or it might be they're saying, you know, I think the neighbour should be, or the accountant. The tribunal takes all of that in and they make a decision. There is a hearing. It's a bit different now with COVID. It used to be in person where you'd face this 3-person panel and everyone would have their say. That still happens, but now it happens online. And the tribunal takes in all of this evidence. They take in the opinion of the older person. And firstly, they confirm, does this older person lack capacity? If they've got capacity, go away. They can appoint someone themselves. They don't need us. But if they don't have capacity, then the tribunal goes, well, do they even need someone to make decisions for them? Is there any decisions that need to be made? And sometimes the big decision is going into aged care. And so it might be, oh, okay, they need someone to help choose the aged care facility, help sell the house. We've got to appoint someone. So this is basically the backup system if you haven't done the documents to appoint someone yourself. This is the last resort. And I kind of see it as a last resort because it takes the decision out of the older person's hands. When they do the power of attorney and enduring guardian, they think about who do I trust? Who do I want making those decisions? And they might say, okay, I want my oldest son to deal with the finances because he's quite financial savvy, but I want all of my children to help make medical decisions because I want them to make those decisions together. And they come up with that decision themselves. When it goes to the tribunal decides. They decide who they think is best to make those decisions for the older person. It might not be the person they would have chosen. And sometimes when there is too much family conflict, when you've got like one child wanting it and another child and they can't agree and they're just arguing and just way too much dispute, basically the tribunal might say, I can't appoint either one of you, we're going to appoint a government organisation, which is a lot less hands-on, but it is the final resort. So basically with the NCAT, they might not appoint who you want them to appoint, and it takes all of that decision making out of the older person's hands.
And is that a costly process at all?
It's not really a costly process. I will say in very, very urgent situations, the tribunal can act quickly to receive an application and set up the hearing date, but it has to be really urgent. Something along the lines of mum's in an aged care facility, the daughter won't let us sell the house, so we're having to pay a lot more money in daily fees. That is not urgent. It might feel urgent to you because you've seen all this money being wasted. That is not urgent to NCAT. They've got serious life and death ones that go to the top. So it might be a couple of months before you get that hearing at NCAT. It's not expensive, but it may take a little while.
Yeah.
So cost should definitely not be a disincentive to anyone making an application. Basically, if anyone has any concerns about an older person and they're worried that they're being abused financially or that nobody's providing adequate care for them, you can make this application. It doesn't cost anything. It just might take a little bit of time.
And can this application be made by a community?
I'll just add two things.
Sorry, you go, Mary.
Sorry, Jess.
Yeah. You go.
I was just going to say two things. It's a no-cost jurisdiction, meaning you don't have to pay anything to make an application. And number two, you don't need a lawyer. In actual fact, they don't want lawyers in NCAT, and we have to make a special application to be able to assist a client in NCAT. It's a tribunal that's specifically set up to help people who are suffering a disability or are vulnerable. And while they have they appear before a panel of three, only one person's a lawyer, another person's a medical practitioner, often a psychiatrist, and the third person is usually a community member. So they're really, really consumer focused.
Thank you. And yeah, my question was just, can a community or health worker make that application, Tanya?
Absolutely. Sometimes they're the people that spot the need for it before anyone else does. So they can be really good at making these applications.
Great, thank you. And yeah, we just had another quick question about interpreters. So if you're at one of these tribunals, I'm assuming an interpreter can be organised for anyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we'll move to our second case study of the day, and this is Pat. So Pat is 65 years old. She lives alone in Western Sydney. She has struggled with mental and physical health issues for many years. She has very few friends and no contact with her extended family. Pat goes to her local club every Friday night to have dinner and play the pokies. Pat was approached and befriended by a woman called Sharon. So Sharon quickly became Pat's best friend and offered to take her to and from the club every week and have dinner with her. But then Sharon started doing Pat's shopping and other small jobs around the house. So Pat gives Sharon her PIN number and her card so she can go and do the shopping and pay her bills. And then she discovered that Sharon started stealing money from Pat's account. So that's our case study, and our question is, what are Pat's options, essentially? So have a read of the options available. So she could ask for the money back, make a complaint to the bank, again report her to the police, contact legal aid or a financial counsellor. She could also change her PIN number. So I'll give you a couple of moments to answer that one. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for participating. So these are our results, guys. Melody, I might go to you first. What would you recommend in this situation before we talk about what actually happened?
So definitely, getting in contact with legal aid and a financial counsellor, one or the other, or sometimes we work together. Legal aid and the lawyers on the legal issues, and financial counsellors on the financial issues. So just to talk about how she's managing her bank accounts and budgeting, and if she has any debts that have popped up, overdue bills. So that's from a financial counsellor's perspective, we could assist her a lot.
Okay. From the Elder Abuse Service perspective?
I'll just talk a little bit about some of the structural challenges in working with clients who are experiencing elder abuse. I mean, essentially, Sharon is just stealing from Pat. But I would bet my house on the fact that if Pat went down to the police station and reported that, the police would say, it's a civil matter. You gave Sharon your PIN number. You actually consented to her withdrawing money from your account, and they probably wouldn't do anything at all. It's not to say that, you know, the police will probably just not act on this. And yet, since coming into the Elder Abuse Service, I realised that there are like groomers, people that hunt out older vulnerable people in places like clubs and identify them and target them. And I think this is a matter that kind of the police should act on in some way. The other thing that stands out for me in terms of sort of legal issues is that if Pat made a complaint to her bank, the bank might say, well, you breached the terms of your contract with the bank by disclosing your PIN number, and so we can't do anything for you. And unless the series of transactions were wildly different than what Pat had normally spent and triggered some suspicion by, a bank teller under the new ABA guidelines, then the bank may not back her either. So, I mean, they're just some of the structural challenges that kind of arise in dealing with elder abuse cases.
And I've got a question here, Mary, sorry. Are there any tips that you would recommend for when people go to the police, or who to ask for, how to report it, if it's being followed up? Are there any tips around that, just basic practicality?
Yeah, I would. I'd say one thing. I'd say that I started off this talk by saying a number of government agencies receive funding for elder abuse services, and police was one big agency. And in New South Wales, they've set up the new Vulnerable Persons Unit, and they're rolling out across the state a number of police officers specifically to deal with older and vulnerable people. And hopefully they will change a little bit of the way the police respond to those issues. So you might want to support the older person in going to the police station and asking the police officers, if it's in New South Wales, whether they have any of the new vulnerable persons unit officers within their unit, and see if you can get an appointment with them. If it's a DV related issue, often it's a family violence issue, and as part of that there's financial abuse. You might want to ask to speak to the DV liaison officer. If the client came to our elder abuse service at Gosford, we would also get our social worker to work very closely with this client to help increase their social networks, because clearly Pat's quick kind of dependency upon Sharon is something that a social worker could work with to increase, to create some better boundaries and to help reconnect Pat with other social networks that may support her, that will make her less vulnerable to these sort of groomers. Did you want to add anything, Tanya?
Yeah, I'm happy that a lot of people chose change the PIN number, because I think sometimes when we look at situations like this with Pat, we focus too much on the big problems and we're just seeing all of this terrible stuff and we're like, we've got to fix the big stuff, and we can lose sight of the really common sense quick solution parts where it's like, first thing you can do, change the PIN number and prevent further money going out. So sometimes we've got to remind ourselves, let's go back to really basic, easy steps as well.
And where would you recommend, so a couple of questions about this. So for that PIN number, say the person isn't technologically advanced or understanding, is there somewhere that you would, or at least a resource, because we've got people from all over Australia here today, to say this is where you could call to find your local, I don't know, technology assist, or is there a program like that at all, guys?
Sure.
I wish.
Yeah.
There is, I'm having a mind blank on the no. I do know, what's it called? It's linked in with Centrelink and they provide some basic training. We will include the link. We'll send out the link.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the Compass website has some links to it. And also, not to make a, generic, a sweeping statement, but a lot of older people do have challenges with technology, and so reconnecting them with face-to-face services at their bank can assist. And even though, I just wanted to go back, even though I pointed to the structural challenges in Pat getting her money back from Sharon, Pat does have a remedy in that, she had an oral agreement with Sharon to, use her PIN to purchase certain things, and then Sharon breached that oral agreement. So she does have a legal remedy to go and get that money back. I suppose it depends on whether Sharon's, got money to repay her, but I just didn't want to abandon Pat's legal remedies. I just wanted to point out like the structural challenges that make elder abuse, hidden in plain sight, is I think how they refer to it.
Someone also has suggested WesNet, do some things around technology and safety. And also My Aged Care has training on scamming.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, so there are just a few others. Okay, we might just move on, and just in the benefit of time, we might sweep through these next kind of referral options, guys, just so we can get on to the benefits that are available to older people and also the top tips that we recommend for helping your older clients be on top of their finances. So just quickly, Mary, Tanya, whoever would like to speak to this, just what the Elder Abuse Service does help with.
So I think we've kind of hopefully touched on the main areas that we can help with. So we can help with problems around powers of attorney and guardianship. We don't do them ourselves, but we can link clients in with services that do provide reduced cost powers of attorney and guardianship. A lot of our clients come to us with problems around housing. That can include, granny flat arrangements or situations where they want to get rid of an adult son or daughter who's living in their house that's being abusive. We do a lot of work with ABOs, supporting clients to make reports to police about physical and sexual abuse. 60% of our work at the moment is looking at financial abuse and money problems, and also issues around Centrelink. So as social worker, I've touched on the things that our social worker can do, things like counselling, facilitated family meetings, reconnecting clients with services, because we know that isolation is a real risk factor for elder abuse, safety planning, and sometimes we refer to our social worker as our interpreter to help explain legal processes in plain language to our clients.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And then so for financial counsellors, Melody.
Yeah, so you've got the list there. I'm just still shocked often of just that people don't realize how much financial counsellors can do. So it's, you know, it's not just budgeting and putting them on a payment plan and referring to, you know, vouchers for utility bills, that basic stuff, but there's so many different options that financial counsellors can assist with, like looking at helping someone access their super early, do a lot of lump sum settlements, so offering 30 or 40% of a debt amount and getting the debt settled from, you know, a smaller amount. We look at bankruptcies, pros and cons of bankruptcy. That's so complicated, bankruptcy, and the laws are changing all the time, but we keep up with all that stuff and just tell the clients, you know, for their particular situation, this is the pros and cons for you if you were to go bankrupt. A lot of debt waivers for people on disability pensions, domestic violence, and also the elderly. So yeah, it's so satisfying being able to say to a client, you don't have any debt anymore, and they say that often that their whole life has changed, that they're not stressed anymore. And yeah, we talk to Centrelink, so there's community liaison workers and social workers with Centrelink that we have a close relationship with, and I'll be emailing them all the time saying, hang on a second, they're not getting much rent assistance, this doesn't seem right to me, can you look into it and tell me what's going on? So just developing those relationships with the local Centrelink officers. Yeah, so there's just so many things we can do, and that list talks about a lot of them. So yeah, I hope you can get familiar with that list when you're referring your clients to financial counsellors.
Yeah, thank you, Melody. I'll also just ask you to speak to our next slide here, which is the domestic violence unit at Legal Aid, and the couple of things. Well, there's quite a lot that they can help with, but it does cross over, as you said, because elder abuse is family violence. So, did you like to just comment on this as well?
Yeah, sure. So, so the domestic violence unit has been going for 6 years, since 2014. We're a team of 27 lawyers, admin staff, social workers, and in the last 6 months, financial counsellors. So we have one on the Central Coast, Gosford, Newcastle area, and myself in Sydney. So there's just so many great things that the team can do, such as making applications for ADVOs, varying that application. Property settlements are a big thing. When someone has left a violent relationship and there's property involved, the lawyers will give advice around that. Representing clients on a grant of legal aid, family law, victim services, and domestic family violence related legal advice. Victim services is an important one. The social workers and myself will help clients get compensation for the violence they've experienced. We help them with the victim services applications, free counselling, as well as amounts of up to $10,000 that they can receive as a one-off to compensate what they've been through. Yeah, and the social workers and financial counsellors, as Mary was saying with the elder abuse team, we're really blessed as well to have that multidisciplinary team and trying to service the client holistically. I just love that we're able to, within our team, with several different roles, help clients so holistically. Yeah.
Thank you. And there's this website that's been set up that you've mentioned, the Family Violence Law Help website, and the link to that's just on your screen at the moment. It's a really great national website that's been set up, so always refer to that for some more information. The top tips for protecting finances. I think this is a great list that you've put together here. Melody, do you want to talk us through some of the tips that you would recommend, I guess?
Yeah, so in relation to financially, so I know that in Western Sydney, you've got the language barriers and especially elderly people as well, cultural and religious differences. And so I encourage a lot of my clients to actually, get to know their local services. So go to the Centrelink and have someone sit on a computer with them and help them print out an income statement. And just with their banks as well, a lot of them still like to have that face-to-face contact and have a receipt in their hand at the end. And so just encouraging that face-to-face contact, building relationships with their local services is something that I really encourage in the Western Sydney area. Yeah.
Tanya, did you want to mention some of those other points?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of these we've touched on throughout the presentation today. But so get legal advice before transferring large amounts of money or transferring property to a family member or friend. It's such a big step that so many people don't get advice before they do it. Refer a client to a financial counsellor before they start paying debts. So what we touched on before, it's so much easier to get a waiver before you start paying and to get some of that payment back. That review personal security, change PIN numbers, change banking passwords, really easy steps. But I think because it is so easy, people forget to do it.
And Tanya actually has just added in 2 links into the chat box for everyone in this webinar. So the Be Connected for online skills for older people, and also Tech Savvy Seniors with New South Wales training there as well. So those links are there. And just before we keep going, I've just noticed that it is 11 o'clock. So if people do have to go, thank you for being here, but we won't rush through. We've probably only got 5 more minutes. So we'll take our time, but yeah, all the links will be in the email, and thank you so much. But let's keep going. So moving to the...
That's a good tip as well. There's a lot of resources out there with training available to older persons to give them the control to manage their finances. It is getting harder because there were so many technical changes, everything's online, and yet people haven't been given the training to move with these changes. And it does take control of their finances out of their hands a little. There's a lot of great programs out there to provide them with training so that they can find out how they can deal with their finances again.
Okay, great. All right, so let's move on then to the benefits that are available to older people. So Melody, you have put together this list for us of the benefits that people can access. Would you like to run us through them?
Yeah, sure. So it's in your handouts in the resource guide, or a lot more detail about these great benefits. So you've got 2 different sorts of seniors cards for people over 60. There's a lot of great concessions that people can get, contracted discounts, as well as New South Wales Centrelink rebates. A lot of people aren't getting a very good contracted discount, up to 30% you can get off gas and electricity bills. Yeah, so we help people with that. No interest loans for up to $1,500 or $2,000 for people that are coming out of domestic violence, and step-up loans are up to $3,000. So they're 2 great options rather than payday loans, clients getting into debt using a Centrelink advance, where fortnightly Centrelink charge them a lot more than what the NILS loan would or the step-up loan would. So 2 really great loans there. I'd mentioned this before with the first case study, but the Essentials AAI insurance, it's contents and car insurance, and it's so cheap compared to AAMI, UE and NRMA, all those other companies. This has been created by financial counsellors for people on a low income or Centrelink benefits. So 2 great forms of insurance there with Essentials AAI. The Centrelink debt hotline. So a lot of our clients are getting given these debts. Some of them are called robo debts, and I know that Legal Aid do have some lawyers that can assist to contest the debts when the client thinks the debts are not their fault. So contact your local Legal Aid to see if they've got a Centrelink specialist. I know that Fairfield Legal Aid, when I was there, they did have a specialist that I worked with, but it's mainly the repayment amount. So they might have quite a small debt for a couple of $1,000s, but Centrelink might be taking $100 a fortnight from them. They can't afford that on an age pension or any Centrelink benefit. So we can assist them to call up the Centrelink debt hotline and reduce the debt down to a minimum of $20 a fortnight. So clients can do that themselves, but sometimes they don't get as good result as when someone is advocating for them. Family, friends, any community worker can help them call up that Centrelink debt hotline to reduce that fortnightly payment down while they can contest the debt. It's still good for them to be paying something back so their payments don't stop. So that's great. That's Centrelink Debt Hotline. Emergency relief, like getting to know the services in your area. You've got Vinnie's, Anglicare, Salvos. They're the 3 big charities across Australia, and find out exactly what they do. Do they do food vouchers? Do they help with medication? The Salvos help with glasses in New South Wales and Queensland. So I've been able to get some of my elderly clients in particular pairs of glasses that are, you know, $100 to $400. Vouchers for utility bills. So you've got Telstra vouchers. I know that Sydney Water provide vouchers to some of the charities, electricity and gas vouchers. They're called EAPA vouchers. So there's so many different great programs that are available for elderly people, people on Centrelink in general, but some better benefits for people who are over the age of 60.
Yeah, I've had a few people write in here. So about local councils as well. So and rates, ask, they don't always advertise it, but if you're on a healthcare card and have been a homeowner for a period of time, there are also additional discounts available.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Great. And just a question from, I think, the previous slide. Is financial aid available to anyone?
Financial aid relating to...
Yeah, I think it was just with protecting finances. I think we were talking about it in relation to the last case study a bit as well. Maybe we can come back to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, were they asking about, like, is legal aid or available, or was it, is financial counselling free? Maybe whoever asked that question, just type a few more words to give us a bit more context.
Yeah, that would be great.
And then just a list of, I mean, again, this is a handout, so you guys can access this. You don't have to take it all in right now. But just a list of some of the resources that we've mentioned today and that we recommend that you keep an eye on and just be able to refer to. And as well, the Centrelink Debt Hotline number, I've just had another colleague who's actually watching this webinar today jump in and say we should be making sure that's up there. So I'll put that into the email as well.
Sure, and it's on the resource, the resource guide, the third handout there for you as well. I put it on there.
Great, thank you guys. Just a little quick look at some of those resources that we spoke about. But essentially, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to start typing them in now. We've got, you know, some time to answer them if there's anything that you didn't feel was answered. I've got another comment. New South Wales Services also has great resources and have discounted purchase for fridges. And help and links and services about discounts and resources available. So we can also include a link for the New South Wales Services.
Thanks for that.
But thank you guys. I mean, if people don't have questions, we can finish up. We'll stay online for a while to answer any of those questions. But if you do have anything that you think of after, please feel free to email either of those links on the screen there. So Elder Service at Legal Aid or Domestic Violence Unit at Legal Aid. And as always, we're open to suggestions and feedback. So if you have been listening today and thought, oh, I've got a great idea, just get in touch with us and we can have a chat to you. But yeah, thank you for my 3 presenters. Is there anything you guys wanted to cover off before we go into a few of these questions?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, great.
I just wanted to say with financial counselling that, as we said, it is available for people who are on any sort of income. So I was working in Surrey Hills in the middle of the city. Some people were earning quite a lot of money working full time. And I had a lady who had shopping addiction and had about 10 credit cards, and she was earning quite a high income. So you know, you've got people earning a lot of money and trying to assist them with those issues, and then people on Centrelink and low income as well. So just to be aware that it's a free service across Australia for anyone and everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. I just had a question. I know people have just slotted into that last poll question there and said that they're now feeling a lot more confident which is great news. I've got a question about if you do suspect elder abuse, just to be clear about where is the best place to make that first call?
There is a couple of options, so it's not saying one will be best. Sometimes it's going to depend on where you're located. So if you're on the Central Coast, you could call our team. But if you're not on the Central Coast, you could call a legal aid office to get some legal advice. If the problem is particularly financial, you might think, I'm not sure if there's a problem here. We need to get someone to look at the finances first and see if something dodgy has happened there. So you might see a financial counsellor first to look into it a bit more, and then the financial counsellor might say, yeah, there's a legal problem here as well. Let's bring legal aid in. Some people, you can even head to those community legal centres or seniors' rights service just to get a little bit of info first.
But in every state in New South Wales, there's an elder abuse hotline. It might be called, if you Googled elder abuse, you'd come up with a hotline. And if you call that hotline, they will direct you to the helpline in your particular state. And that helpline should be able to also direct you to a number of services, including legal aid, including community legal centres, including seniors' rights, that are local to where that problem is occurring.
Yeah, great. Thank you, guys. A question about the DV unit. Melody, is there, what's the visa status to access the DV unit? Is there any?
No, that's why it's so fantastic, because I know that probably about 40% of my clients across Sydney don't have permanent visas. They're on partner visas coming out of a DV relationship. They're on bridging visas. And so no, just the same as financial counselling, there's no criteria about what visas you have to be on. And it's been a real challenge in the last 6 months of my role to find services that provide accommodation and income and for women that aren't eligible for Centrelink benefits. So I'm enjoying putting a resource together and also challenging policies and procedures, trying to get these people on visas support.
Yeah, great, thank you. And one final question that we had that's come in about the first case study. About settling, so why would you settle the debt when the loans were taken out as being coerced into a loan?
So in this situation, so that they were eligible for a debt waiver. So it depends on the financial situation when we do, it's called full and final settlement or lump sum settlements. It depends on the client's financial situation. So it's often when they're not eligible for a waiver that will try a lump sum settlement. So I had a gentleman with a property and he had a credit card and he accessed his super early, and then we offered, 30-40%. So because he has an asset, he wasn't eligible for a waiver. So the next best option to clear that debt was a lump sum settlement. So it depends on the situation.
Yeah. Okay.
This question has also highlighted one of the problems with financial abuse legally. So there is abuse there. There is a form of fraud and theft. And normally Matthias might initiate civil law proceedings to get the money back from his son. So if he hadn't got that financial advice and he'd been forced to pay back the full loan, he might then take legal proceedings against his son to get the money back from his son. One of the key problems with this situation is that if the son doesn't have the money to pay him back, there's no use in taking that legal option. It's going to incur more legal costs and you're not going to get anything out of it. So we do see cases of elder abuse where the abuser has used the money, they've gambled it away, they've spent it all. There's no getting that money back from that person. And sometimes that financial option is absolutely going to be the best outcome the client's going to get.
Yes, I've had a lot of referrals from lawyers, yeah.
And the last challenge I'll speak about in relation to that is that undue influence. It's a legal concept, and it would be the subject of a court action. It is a high threshold to prove, and there may well be the circumstances for undue influence to set that contract aside. But the challenge would be for Mattias is that he would essentially be going up against his son, and it would bump up against that challenge around elder abuse, getting older people to kind of essentially, go against their family. And I guess what a debt waiver offers is an opportunity to not have to do that, but to still get a good outcome. It's not, I guess I just mention it because it also kind of highlights the structural challenges in both accessible remedies for older people and the challenges in speaking out about elder abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we might leave it there. We haven't had any more questions come in, but we've still had lots of people staying around to answer those. So that's been great, guys. And thank you to everybody who has participated. I guess we will see you next time.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks,
Jess.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.